That is why they are so fervent. TV with your host, Jeff Charles.
Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
Hello and welcome to Right On, where we tackle the issues of the day from the right perspective. Now, last time we talked about wokeism in the military with Dave Patterson. But today, we're going to discuss how the far left has been trying to infiltrate the economic sector, but it's not quite going the way they want. The world of woke corporatism has taken a major hit as the ESG movement is experiencing a downward trend. So is this the end of the ESG movement? Well, I have with me Liberty Nation's economics correspondent, Andrew Moran, to discuss the issue in English in a way that even I can understand. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you for having me, and I have ChatGPT ready in the background.
Great. Now, for those who aren't familiar, can you explain what the ESG movement is?
So the ESG movement is environmental social governance. That's what the ESG stands for. And the whole point is to invest sustainably. So you're investing in companies that say they're green and say they're socially active and say they have great governance. Although if you look at the broader scope of ESG, they focus more on the environmental part than anything else. And even that comes into question. So pretty much ESG is woke points for corporate America.
Wonderful. It's yet another way to virtue signal towards the progressive crowd, from what I understand. How long has this movement been around? Like, when did it really get started?
Well, it was the whole concept was proposed by an economist, I think, in 2017. And then if you look at, or maybe a little bit earlier, around that time, and then it started really growing in around 2018, 2019, and then it peaked in 2020. And then ever since then, if you look at some of the data, the money going into ESG has actually been on the decline despite more widespread attention. This is probably due to the fact that more investment companies and banks are turning sour on woke investing. There was a recent, I think it was the Vanguard CEO or Charles Schwab CEO, and he said, "Nah, we're not really interested in having politics in our investing management."
Okay, I'm going to get to that in a second, but I think I know the answer to this question, but I want to hear yours first. Why did the ESG movement experience such a boom in the 2020s?
Because I can understand it. Sorry, I can just understand it because there's so much money being pumped into going green and being environmentally friendly. I mean, that's the new, being, I remember there was a commercial a few years ago on Pepsi where they had that protest against the cops, and then someone had that sign that says, let's be cognizant of cops or something like that. It's the same idea, but for the environment to be eco-friendly. That's why it started gaining traction. But the other two components of the social and governance, nobody seems to really care about that anymore. As long as you have that environmental green tag on your company, you're going to attract, at least in theory, investment. But the problem with ESG entirely, not just from an economic standpoint, but also there's a term called greenwashing. Now, greenwashing has been prevalent throughout ESG, and that's why it's one of the reasons why people become disinterested in it, is because you're pretty much lying about how you're being eco-friendly. Just saying that you're green doesn't actually mean you are going green. Right. And that's been one of the main factors. If you look at some of the industry surveys of ESG, a lot of people are worried about that, about the future of ESG and sustainable investing.
Interesting. And real quick, my theory is what happened in 2020, George Floyd. That's when you saw a lot of these corporations going woke. But it's interesting what you say, because that relied more on the social aspect and maybe governance too, not so much environmental, because everybody was talking about race. All these corporations were pretending like they love Black people. But now you're saying, the focus has been more on the green aspect. Why has that taken more precedence over the social and governance part of ESG?
Well, I'll just, before I get into that, I'll point out that there was a great study by CIBC a year or two ago, and it talked about how a lot of these companies avoided the social and governance aspect because they were investing in Russian energy companies despite having ties to Vladimir Putin. So that's why I say that nobody really cares about the social and governance aspect, at least in theory. Now, when it comes to the environmental billions of free monies being funneled into the whole green economy. The whole Inflation Reduction Act, which has nothing to do with inflation, it just gives you billions of dollars in handouts to the green lobby while money's being reduced to the whole oil and gas sector. So it's just about taxpayer money going into the into the green economy. That's the driving factor or driving force behind why these ESG funds have become popular.
So it's the money, of course it is. Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. Especially I know how much the American government will subsidize this environmental stuff. Now, in your article that you wrote for Liberty Nation, in that you also talked about on Swamponomics, your show, you noted that ESG-focused ETFs, exchange-traded funds, have experienced a downward trend. Now, given the fact that the environmental aspect is still heavily involved, still heavily subsidized, why has that happened?
Okay, so first of all, it was Bloomberg data that showed that there were considerable outflows of these ETF deposits, and that's been actually the zenith was in 2020. Ever since then, you see the charts, and it's been gradually going down. Well, I think one of the biggest factors, there are a couple of factors. So the first factor is one, whole ESG has garnered so much political attention over the last 12 months. A lot of Republican-led states, they're targeting ESG. They want nothing to do with it. They want fiduciaries to focus primarily on making returns for investors. And ESG funds, you look at some of the data last year in 2022, it fell way behind more conventional index funds. This year, it's still behind or matching broader conventional broader conventional funds as opposed to the ESG. So that's one of the factors. I think the other factor too is that I mentioned earlier, a lot of these companies, they don't want to get involved in the politics of the ESG. You see these CEOs more are just abandoning these global agreements of saying, you know what, let's be woke. But they say, no, we don't want to be woke. We just in the business of making money. We want to do what's best for our clients and what's best for the broader economy. And the broader economy is showing, and investors are telling you, yeah, our bottom line is far more important than being woke.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's not surprising that this would happen, but I would have thought that it would have taken a much longer time because being woke still holds a lot of currency. What do you think the proponents of the ESG movement are going to do to try to bounce back from this?
Well, you saw that recently with President Joe Biden. He signed an executive order that reversed that legislation that would have prohibited the retirement managers from focusing entirely on ESG provisions. So I think they're going to use the tool of the government to try to voice this onto the public. And maybe there'll be social media backlash saying, "Oh, Wall Street only care about profits," and then Wall Street will try to appease them and saying, no, we really care about green energy and windmills and solar panels, and even though they've done nothing to support the American people at all during this whole energy crisis. So that's what they're going to do. So it's going to be government coercion and then outrage on social media, which is all the rage, of course, as you know.
Of course. And that's kind of what I figured. I mean, when you can't get it done through persuasion, you just use the state. Now I understand this is what they're going to do. Do you think it's going to work, or do you think it's time to start singing that funeral dirge for the ESG movement? That's the last question.
Well, it's based on what the market tells you. So so there's a great economist, I think it was Joseph Schumpeter, and he said that the greatest democratic force in the whole world is the market. Now, the market is telling you, for now, we're not interested. We're no longer interested in ESG, and that's been the case. The numbers show that. So I guess the only thing they're gonna try to resuscitate it is through government force. Democrats, there's no way they're gonna say, yeah, we're against ESG. But there was a funny thing. It was a Wall Street investor or Wall Street analyst, and he said the future of ESG will be the Fight Club rule, whereby the number one rule of ESG investing is you do not talk about ESG investing. So you completely avoid it as much as possible. So perhaps there'll be some sort of stealth backdoor components to reviving sustainable investing or woke investing.
Yeah, one thing that we can always count on for especially progressives, they're not going to give up easy. So I'm sure we'll be talking about this again, but thank you for joining the program, sir.
Thank you for having me.
And remember, the show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news and analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Just go to LibertyNation.com on your browser, or hit Rumble, YouTube, or check out our Liberty Nation News Roku channel. I'm Jeff Charles. Thank you so much for watching. This program is a production of LibertyNation.com, where truth is making a comeback.
Entertaining, informative, and just plain fun. Watch Liberty Nation's The Conservative Five, produced by conservatives for conservatives. C5's The Left Free Zone, hosted by Liberty Nation's Lisa K. Donner, joined by a raucous, irreverent panel of authors, deconstructing leftist narratives, debating the hot topics, and remembering to laugh.
You heard it here first.
Join the official conservative safe
You only
space.
did that to piss Jeff off.
Liberty Nation's The Conservative Five.
That is why they are so fervent. TV with your host, Jeff Charles.
Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.